I've recently been digging into the lore of the Callisto Protocol, and having exhausted all the characters that I think are of particular note in this game, I thought we'd take a look at the ending and see what it implies about the future of the universe should it be continued. An event that seems pretty unlikely at the moment, but we'll get to that near the end of the video.
End of the line, get up. And mates, I gave you a direct order.
This is not right, I don't belong here.
To start with a bit of an overview for the game, we play as a cargo pilot named Jacob Lee, who's been contracted to deliver supposed medical supplies from Jupiter's moon Callisto to another moon, Europa. The mission is shady, but Jacob's in it for the pay. A need for money that comes back to bite him when Europa experiences a devastating biological attack shortly after they've made their shadowy delivery. Jacob's pretty callous to the coincidence, but a surprise boarding by a rebel faction known as the Outer Way brings the vessel down over Callisto, where he's found by security personnel. This man, named Leon Ferris, arrests both Jacob and the lone survivor of the Outer Way attackers, Danny Nakamura, locking them up in the prison on the moon at the behest of the warden Duncan Cole. Jacob doesn't know what's going on, but wakes up to absolute chaos in the prison. Monsters now roaming the halls as he gets into contact with a man named Elias Porter, who tells him that he knows a way to escape. From here, Jacob follows Elias's instructions, making his way all throughout the prison, until a mutated Captain Ferris kills his companion and forces a shaky alliance between Danny and Jacob. With her lead, they discover a minor colony known as Arcus, where the pathogen that's now running rampant through the prison originated. As it turns out, the prison was established as a means for easy test subjects to try and harness this pathogen dubbed the biofage for the supposed evolution of humanity. A group of elites from Earth, known as the Commonality, funding this research, with the current Warden of Black Iron being a particularly dedicated member. He had set the biofage free in the prison, and had also been largely responsible for the outbreak on Europa. Cole being the mysterious benefactor for Jacob's trips from Callisto to Europa, with the supposed medical supplies actually being samples of larvae carrying the virus that resulted in the outbreak. Jacob would be crushed by the revelation of his part in all this, even more so as he found out that it was partially his fault that Danny's sister had died in the tragedy. With new determination, the pair would make their way to the Warden's Tower and confront Cole and his alpha Ferris. Jacob managing to beat Ferris despite his evolution, and using an antidote given to him by a repentant researcher named Dr. Mahler to cure Danny, who'd contracted the biofage. The pair rushing off to the escape pods, but finding only one remaining. Jacob throwing Danny in and giving her a test sample of the larva as evidence, before resigning himself to his death. Repentant for the wrongs he'd done to her and the citizens of Europa.
Jacob, there might be a way out after all.
Reactor core temporary safeties activated.
But I'm going to need your help.
The base game ending on a cliffhanger of Mahler suggesting that there may be another escape. This leading us into the DLC, where Jacob overcomes a much more dilapidated version of the prison, following Mahler's instructions and attempting to find this promised salvation. Only for it to be shown that it's all a figment of his imagination, as in reality, Mahler had been keeping him an inch from death the whole time, using a previous connection between his and Danny's neck-laden cores to transfer more damning evidence to her against the UJC and the Commonality.
Jacob, you did it. And now, your fight is done.
That's where the story ends, with a whole lot of loose ends to tie up, because it seems they had much bigger plans for this world. To start with what is most concretely explained, let's start by talking about the fate of Jacob. Namely, at what point did he go from freeing Danny to a legless, armless vegetable? His conclusion is very abrupt and confusing because of the twist at the end, which we get very little explanation for outside of a short monologue from Mahler. To me, there are two possibilities to connect the base game ending and the start of the DLC. The first, and what I would say is less likely, would be that Jacob was ripped apart in the onslaught immediately after launching Danny, with the scene where he sees the hologram of Mahler being a pain-induced hallucination because clearly he had at least his arms at that point. The second being that after the transmission, he blacked out and was ripped apart by another wave of biophages, with Mahler having to drag him back to the lab at a later point. Both of these have their issues though, namely in the inclusion of the Ferris jump scare. We experience delusions throughout the game that seem to be in relation to the core in our neck, which is what you'd assume Ferris to be because we just killed him and stuck a syringe in his eye not 10 minutes prior. Yet, if he somehow survived that and then de-evolved, my two scenarios above could mesh very well. The Mahler transmission occurring before Ferris appears and rips Jacob apart, with Mahler then having to retrieve what remains.
I found him in the Warden's Tower and dragged him here. His link to Danny's core still active. I used this connection to upload the full details of the experiment.
The next question being what happened to Cole in the Commonality, which again is set up to go one of two ways. The first would be that Danny takes the evidence of what happened on Callisto and exposes the UJC and the Commonality, destroying them both with bad PR. This seems unlikely because there are no real police that we know of on Jupiter's moons. It's all controlled by the UJC's security forces, which are obviously under the influence of the Commonality. Leading to the second and more likely outcome in my mind, being that Danny takes her findings back to the Outer Way and they begin distributing it to the populace, exposing the UJC and causing a mass revolt. The Outer Way emboldening their ranks as they take more direct action against the UJC outside of just guerrilla tactics that they've been known for in the lead up to the game. Of course, this is just pure theory crafting, because we're really only left with the fact that Danny escaped with the evidence, and Cole escaped with plans to use the events on Callisto as a basis for more mayhem, likely leading to another outbreak on another of Jupiter's moons, as perhaps Danny is able to get a faction from Earth to see her plight and join in the fight against the Commonality in the best case scenario.
In the chaos of the moment, I didn't realize he had also given me the evidence I was looking for all along. And sacrificed his life so that I could expose the truth.
Which leaves us with what is perhaps the biggest unknown in this game, in that we don't really know anything about the biofage. Is it a virus that seeks to grow and adapt just for the sake of survival? Or, as Mahler suggests, does it have a greater consciousness that links all this mass together? If Mahler's correct, that would make the virus a bit too much like Dead Space in my opinion. The necromorphs have the markers, which are packing all this biomass to be absorbed by the Brethren moons, so personally I'd rather it just be a brutal contagion that forces those affected to evolve at an unnatural pace. However, given Mahler's comments, it would seem that they had plans to turn the biophage into a more sentient entity, this leading to the likely probability that the alien lifeform was just an unfortunate victim that had been frozen and unthawed by the miners, it having been infected much like the prisoners, with perhaps a more pure version of this virus existing somewhere out in the stars. The unknowns of where that thread could go being the biggest question that we're left with in this game. A question that will almost certainly never be answered because Striking Distance Studios is all but dead. Glenn Schofield, the director of the Callisto Protocol, left in 2023, and in February of 2025, most of the developers were laid off. Since the Callisto Protocol released in 2022, they've released one other title, which is a tie-in to Callisto entitled Redacted, which is a roguelike that apparently follows the prison guards of Black Iron fighting off the biophage. I've not played the game, but it seems fairly well-liked, yet must not have sold very well. From what I understand, it has no real implications on the lore of the Callisto Protocol, but with both of these commercial failures, the studio seems to be drastically downsized, meaning a follow-up is exceedingly unlikely. A shame, because I personally believe the established universe had a lot more to explore, but maybe someday we'll get a miracle. Anyway, that's about all I've got to say on this game. Thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.